Maybe I'm just a bit daft or behind the times, something like that. But I've just watched a video that one of my lovely correspondents has sent me, which made me start thinking. One of the things is in this world, we're just not thinking enough. We just accept things. Scientists tell us something like, I don't know, there's global warming, and we all go, oh, is there? And then they say, yeah, here's some evidence that we've proved. And because we're not climate scientists, we all go, oh, right, OK, fair enough. And then the next minute, it's a net zero policy. We're going to get rid of all of CO2. And we think, oh, OK, if that's what it takes to save the planet, because we're all very busy people. We've all got our own lives. We're all doing things. And we assume that scientists, you know, have got the best interests at heart, that they're not actually being paid by, I don't know, big corporations or indeed the government to sell a narrative which isn't actually in our interest. And we don't really terribly much question these things. Now, I blame that because we've just had school system that's effectively stopped us from asking questions, and it's gone from asking questions to telling us to accept what they tell us. This is the facts, they're the truth, mainstream media do it, and if you have a difference of opinion, you're an idiot, so don't have it. So I was watching something just now that one of my correspondents sent in, and it was very kind of him. Thanks very much. You know who you are, Jeff. And I was watching this, and I won't play it in. I'll put a link in the description, and you can go and find it and have a look at it yourself and see what you make of it. And I'll be interested in your comments, of course, as usual. So it's on BitChute. It's called System Collapse by a chap called The Crow House. And I've seen a few of his videos. I don't regularly follow very many people. But at about 10 minutes in, here we go, look, what's that? About 10 minutes, 9:54, it says on there, he interviews this woman who is an Australian and worked in the wind farm industry. And she started to reveal something rather fascinating, that apparently the wind farms themselves, these windmills, that they need an electric charge to get throwing, which is, of course, a fossil fuel. Fossil fuel energy is providing the initial starter motor, if you like, of these wind farms, the blades, to get them going around. And so when the wind blows sufficiently, it presumably turns off the fossil fuel electricity that's got it going, and then it can start to generate its own electricity itself. But she said wind fluctuates, you know, you get a gust, it's not like a complete constant. It's very rare, isn't it, to stand outside. We all know what it's like if you stand on the top of a cliff or on a hill or even on the seafront or in a big field where there's no trees or anything, and you feel the wind. It's very rare for the wind itself to just be going as if someone's actually blowing a fan at you. And yet when you look out and you look at these wind farms and you look at them, they all seem to be in lockstep, half a dozen, maybe 10, 12, maybe 20, maybe 100, all on the landscape. They're all blowing at a constant, aren't they? Which is a bit strange, because why would that be? Well, maybe you could say there is some sort of mechanism in there that once they get going, if the wind blows a bit much, that you wouldn't want them to start sort of going a bit faster and then slower and what have you. If you know those seaside little windmills that you give children when you go next to the buckets and spades and all of that, and you go like that, you hold it up and then they spin round really fast. I suppose there'd be some gearing mechanism to prevent them going too fast, so that I guess maybe that's why they go constant. But if you've got all these wind farms, and we've got millions of these bloody things all up and down the countryside, all using a bit of fossil fuel to get going, but because it's intermittent wind, there must be times when they slow down, because the wind, as I say, isn't full on all the time. So they've got to slow down, and yet they don't appear to. Anyway, she was saying that actually what goes on as a whistleblower, she was saying that this isn't what happens. This isn't, you don't get a constant energy. It can't go back into the grid very easily. And when it comes in, it basically, a lot of it is just thrown away. You go and watch the link and have a look at it and see what you make. I'll be fascinated to know. Are these wind farms purely a great big lie, sold to us as part of the answer to get us off fossil fuels, because fossil fuels have been demonized because of the so-called man-made global warming and the CO2 gases that comes from burning fossil fuels. CO2, by the way, the gas of life, just in case you'd forgotten that actually that's what you need in order to get plants to grow. And as we eat plants in our diet mostly, and you know that things like tomatoes, greenhouses have CO2 pumped in to actually help the tomatoes grow. So it does seem a bit bonkers that the gas that we're trying to get shot of, which is a gas of life and a gas of growing for trees and for the plants, that if we lower it too much, it's not going to be any use to us because we won't be able to eat. And in fact, we'll all just perish. But when you look at, so here, I want to show you a picture of, hang on a minute, I've just lost it. Let me just get that one out of the way. Let me just show you a picture. Here we go. Here is wind farms just on the old imaging. Look at that. We see what they look like. But look at the size of the blades. And that is supposed to be enough to get the wind to turn them round. There are hundreds of them. Look how many there are. There are just millions of these bloody things. But when you think back to the old type of windmill that captured wind, same number of blades mostly. Look, these are big. These would have sails on. These are windmills without the sail actually on. You've got the frame, but the sails have been removed because these are all heritage items. And so the sails, if the sails were on, there'd be too much wind going in them. But let's have a look at this one just for the sake of argument. I wonder if I can put that into opening image in another. There we go. Look at that. You see how big that is? These have got shutters. So sometimes they use shutters. So when the shutters are shut, it captures more wind. And that then is enough to turn them. And if you think back to the days of the windmill and you go to a windmill, I mean, the windmill operators, the heritage windmill operators these days will tell you that very often, you know, the wind comes and goes. So great big sails like that, they capture some of the wind and then they have to turn where the wind is as the wind changes its direction and goes all over different places. But isn't that a bit odd? That these wind farms have got these tiny little blades, the sort of type that you'd see on an aeroplane, you know, like an old propeller aeroplane that is going forward at speed. So because of the speed of it going forward, it's increasing the amount of volume of air going through it. You can understand that. So it's going around this way, whatever, and the blades are in such a position to suck the air this way. Presumably the blades are supposedly doing that, but it's just relying on the wind that is going gently or a little bit more forcefully whenever. We're told science, this is my point, we're told science, we're just told these windmills work this way. But is it really true? We keep getting told this is the science, there is one science, this is how it works. But why is it in that case, the old windmill, there it is, the old windmill, with its great big sails, seems to have struggled to capture enough wind because it was constantly turning to turn the mechanism to get the stones just to mill flour, and yet the modern turbine has much smaller blades. Are we being lied to? Is that whistleblower wrong? Have I got the wrong end of the stick? I'd love to know your thoughts. Is this just one more strange quirk in the world that's turned upside down? And do we really need to question everything?